that you guys are busy, know that you have a lot going on. And so whether you are a brand new speaker just getting started, maybe you've been doing this for a while and trying to figure out how to improve your presentation. You hear me talk a lot about the business of speaking and how to create or how to do the marketing side of it, but there's the other side of it. One of your most important marketing tools is having a great presentation. And so Paul has done a ton of speaking. We just had him on the podcast as well. Good friend and just an all-around great guy. So I've got my notepad and a pen ready to go. And again, it's 2 o'clock Central Time, and so we want to jump right into it. So Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll be here hanging out as well and taking some notes, ready to go.
Man, I appreciate it, Grant. I'm honored that you would bring your folks before me. It's always with my ADHD. It's a little bit of a risk, but we'll try to stay on target as much as we can today. And guys, right there in the lane, those of you who are here live, right there in the lane of all your settings, you'll see a handout. You should have gotten that by email, and I'll send it out with a replay as well, just so you make sure you get that and you can take notes on it and go back through it, because we've got a lot that we're going to be hitting today. I did mention this in the email as well, but super quick. I'm not doing like a 20-minute background bio, but I gave my first speech at age 12, paid to speak by the time I was 16. I've given 2,500 plus paid presentations. I've helped over 35,000 speakers, helped them be trained in public speaking. Author of 7 books, hundreds of digital products that I've created and sold, and I've got a $10,000 non-celebrity keynote fee, and by that I mean I'm unknown. And so when you think about being paid to speak, sometimes we feel like we've got to reach this certain level and reach this height before we can, quote, command a certain fee. But the truth is, if you've got any experience at all and you're able to work in the industry in a strong way and bring value, then $10,000 is really about the going rate for a non-celebrity speaker. If you're just starting out, it's probably closer to $2,500 to $3,000 if you're not established yet. Bottom right is my family. Jose is there in the middle. Going to go see him tomorrow. Super pumped about that. We're going to spend a few days down in Mexico doing some work at our orphanage and also visiting Jose, so we're pumped about that. All right, so as we get started today, when it comes to really connecting with the audience, and that's what we're going to spend time talking about, how in the world do we connect in a way that's strong? Do we have a keynote or presentation that keeps attention, that we engage the audience, that we have the type of talk that we cannot wait to give and the audience cannot wait to hear? To me, guys, this is the core of what we're doing, that we are making that impact and that difference and bringing that value, because if we measure it, then we're going to be thinking in terms of not simply, if I don't do a good job, I wasted an hour, but if I don't do a good job and there's 1,000 people in the room, I wasted 1,000 man hours. Those people could have been somewhere else for an hour. My goal right now for the next hour or so is to make sure that you're getting content that is valuable, that is worth you being here, because there's so many other things that you could be doing and so many other places you could be. But here's the truth, that our words multiply influence and impact. They're powerful. They make a difference. They provide the catalyst for a changed life if a person decides to take those and live it. But the challenge is sometimes we've got too much. And we've all heard people who have given a keynote that had so much information that you really were thinking, wow, if they would have just covered that point, I would have gotten it, right? So sometimes when we're planning out our talks, we've just got too much to pull from. Sometimes we've got too little. We've got like this great story that we love and this statistic that we love or this article that we read, and we really don't have a keynote at all. And we don't have a full-length presentation at all. We've just got an idea or a concept, and sometimes we want to run with that. Another problem is we can be too dull. And we've all been trapped in the audience where the speaker was so dull that we were just looking for an out and looking for an escape. Now, just because I mentioned the word dull, that does not mean that we've got to be hilarious or that we've got to be entertaining or we have to have this larger-than-life personality. It means that we understand our relationship with the audience. One of my good friends is named Rick, and his personality is not high level. He does not talk fast. He does not engage in a way through energy. And in fact, he's a very quiet talker and a very methodical talker. But what we started working on was the Rickometer, and it's like always in the middle. And when he's excited, it just tilts to the right just like a hair. But he'll do this in front of the audience, And he'll say, now, guys, you couldn't tell because of my voice, but I was very excited about that last point. And then he'll pull out the Rickometer and show him just how excited he is. So he went from being dull to being able to use his own personality without changing it to become a lot more interesting. Another problem is that we can become too scattered. We can be all over the place. I was just talking to a guy yesterday that came in with his notes, and he was talking about doing a presentation all over the place. He had, you know, probably 3 or 4 good talks on his page. I said, I love where you're going, but the truth is you've got 4 talks here. And what we need to do is center on one and pull it together so that it's tight. And you're not going to lose the audience if you're tight and if you're clear. So we got to be careful of being too scattered. And we've also got to be careful of being too needy. We are not there to gain from the audience. The audience is there to gain from us. The audience is not our therapist. The audience is not our validator. Because we're going to get paid to speak some places where we're going to have to say some things that will not be popular with the audience. And if the rate sheets are what we're judging our value by, there's going to be times when we're going to say some things that are unpopular and we're going to get paid a lot of money for it, and the audience is not going to be thrilled. So we can't be needy. We are not there to gain from the audience. The audience is there to gain from us. And so those 5 problems we've really got to be on guard against, because if we've got too much, too little, too dull, too scattered, or too needy, then our talk's going to be ineffective right out of the gate. So we got to be careful with that. So what we want to do is move from cluttered to clear. We want everything in our mind to be sharp and everything that we're going to express to be clear, so that we're not searching for our message during the message, but that we know exactly what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, who we're going to say it to, and the impact that it's going to make. The best way by far to get a gig is to crush a gig. I know that Grant's been teaching you guys all about how to get booked. The cool thing is, if you can get booked once or twice and kill it, you can absolutely stay booked. My entire speaking career has been based on doing a presentation and turning that into multiple engagements. I was coming up during the time of like tapes, cassettes, that we didn't have, like even DVDs. Those started coming out a little bit, but I never had any of those tools. My goal was to simply turn one gig into multiple gigs. So the best way to get a gig is to crush a gig. And the way that we do that is by making it unforgettable. So there's 3 points here that you want to write down. You should have your outline there with you. But number 1 is that to become unforgettable, you've got to make sure that your talk is memorable. Not just memorable to the audience. It needs to be memorable to you. You've got to be able to remember your own talk. That's critical. If somebody asks you what you talk about, you say, I'm a speaker, and they go, well, what do you talk about? And you're searching, all right, it's not even memorable to you. But instead, if you're able to say something like I say, well, I've got a keynote for life insurance people called Super Agent. And in that talk, I share boom, 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 and boom, because it's memorable to me. And it's not just memorable because I've given it a lot. It was memorable right out of the gate because it was designed to be remembered. It was not designed to simply share information. It was designed to be remembered. Even with this, with unforgettable, even though we're going to cover a lot of material today, but I believe that by the end, if I came back to unforgettable, most of you are going to be able to remember these 3 points on this screen because they are memorable. So number 1 is memorable. Number 2 is portable. So our talk needs to be easy to remember, but it also needs to be easy for people to take with them. How often have we heard somebody speak and we go away and have forgotten what they talked about, and we don't remember any of the points? We don't really remember the overall theme. That's because it was not portable. It wasn't memorable and it wasn't portable. We couldn't take it with us. Ken Davis makes a great point about this. It was years ago. He was speaking at a youth conference, and when he came out, he heard 2 kids talking, and one of the kids said, hey, man, did you just hear that speaker? And the kid said, no, I didn't hear him. He said, was he any good? He said, man, he was in incredible. He goes, really? One of the best speakers I've ever heard. He goes, man, that's wild. What did he talk about? Man, I don't know, but he was funny. And Ken was like, wow, I realized that while I'd connected, I'd not communicated. So he was memorable with his jokes, but he wasn't memorable with his points, and it wasn't portable. That couldn't take it with him. We want our audience to take it with them. And then finally, we want it to be shareable. So memorable, portable, and shareable. So that when the friend asks, they can tell him a point, or tell him 2 points, or say, here's what I got out of the message. But to be unforgettable, to crush a gig, we've got to be memorable, we've got to be portable, and we've got to be shareable in our message. That's exactly how we have to design them. So in order to do that, I'm going to give you the 5 core elements of an unforgettable keynote. 5 core elements, and you can write these down on the handout or just write them down on your own sheet of notebook paper. So number 1 is content. Number 1 is content. Here's what I believe with all of my heart about content. That great content never has a bad day. Most speakers that I talk about are really worried about their performance. They're worried about being nervous. They're worried about their voice shaking or their knees quaking, and they're worried about all those things, and I get it, but I want us to be worried about our content. I want us to be worried about how incredible is what we are going to be sharing, so that whether or not we're having a good day, maybe we're sick, maybe we don't feel our best, that we know our content rocks, that our content is going to knock it out. Great content never has a bad day. You've never picked up a book and thought, this book's in a bad mood. I'm not reading this thing. It's in a bad mood. No, because it's just content. The book is not emotional. Your content, though it can be expressed emotionally, it's not emotional. Once you have your outline and it's clear, it's precise, and regardless of sick or health or funny that day or unfunny that day or on or off, your content is the same. It's strong and it's valid and it's memorable and it's portable and it's shareable. So how do we do this? Number 1, and these will be very familiar points on content. You've probably heard them a dozen times or more, but I still think you probably need to write these down. Number 1 is great content educates people. Maybe that's through a reminder, or maybe it's through something brand new. So what we want to do is make sure that people are educated in some way, unless you're being told not to educate. And I'll get to that in just a minute. It has happened. But for the most part, we're going to go in there and educate. We're going to have our points, and we're going to have our evidence that those points are true. We're going to have stories that support. But at the end, people have learned something new and they've gained, and there's an advantage. So when you're looking at your outline, you need to ask yourself, how am I educating people with this? How are they better off because they hear this message? How is this great content? And is this as great of a content message as I can put together? Is this outline as clear as it can be? Secondly, we want to encourage people. Now, there are rare times when we may be called on to discourage, but by and large, we're going to encourage people. We're going to give them hope. They're going to feel like what we're teaching on or training on or sharing is actually possible for them, and that they are not simply going, oh, wow, yeah, well, that guy's a genius. No wonder. That girl is like top of her class. No wonder. She's an athlete. No wonder. But instead, that there's that belief within them that goes, oh, I can do this. I'm so glad I'm hearing this message because I believe. So there's encouragement within your content itself. And this is separate from you. So that if they just saw your outline, they would see something that educated them, or they would see something that encouraged them. Just looking at your outline, separate from you. That's how strong our content has to be. Take us out of the way, and the content and the message stands on its own. Number 3 is to entertain. Everybody's not going to be funny. Everybody's not going to be hilarious. Everybody is not going to be able to put things together in a way that is, so enlightening of the heart that it's just off the charts, right? But we can entertain in that we put our content together in a way that makes sense, that's memorable, portable, and shareable. And whether that means that we're going to use alliteration or we're going to use rhyme. Right now I'm doing alliteration straight on the page. I'm going to do it the whole way through. And there are a lot of people who will say, well, you know, alliteration, that's so elementary. Who cares? My goal is for people to remember it. My goal is not to impress the academics. My goal is to make sure that it's attached to the heart and people walk out of the audience remembering that message. And if I have to put it in a form that a 2-year-old can remember, or a 3-year-old, or a second grader, yeah, that's fine. The way that I think about it, you can tell from my accent, is if people from Alabama can understand this message and apply it, I'm in the zone. All right, last Alabama joke. Then there is equip. So what we want to do is to make sure that we're able to actually equip them. They're able to take the actual message that we're sharing and go and apply it and become different because of it. And this is not going to be true of each and every message. Sometimes we're just educating, sometimes we're just encouraging or motivating, but other times we're going to be equipping so that if they follow the steps that we share in the message, they're going to be able to go out and perform at the same level. And then empowerment. This is a little bit different from encouragement. Encouragement means that I think I can do this. Empowerment means that we hand the keys over to them and they feel connected to it and they know that they're going to be able to do it. So they're going to feel a responsibility and a necessity to go out and actually do that thing, to connect with that and to make a difference with it. And that's when we empower them in a way that makes them feel like it's super, super strong. All right? So great content never has a bad day. So in our work together, this is Shauna. Paul was able to help me leverage my story, pull out a complete keynote. So this is Shauna Ekstrom. She is one of the top earners in a direct marketing company. And when we got together, she had a lot of ideas and a lot of content, but was not able to pull it all together. But once we shaped it, and once we made it clear for her, she was able to step on stage, be extremely confident, and know that there was going to be an impact within the life of that audience because she had pulled it together with those E's that we just talked about. And that's totally different than just getting up and thinking, hey, I've got some good stuff to share. She actually ended up knowing what it was that was valuable about what she was sharing. So number one is content. Number two is context. Context. So what we want to do is to match the content to the client. And this is especially true if we're getting paid, but we're going to match the content to the client. We're going to match the content to the audience. So one of the ways that we're going to do that is to understand the problems that are taking place. Whatever that particular client is facing, whatever they are going through at that time that they're struggling with, we want to make sure that they are able to hear within our message a solution for that. So problems are going to be one tie-in. Secondly, persons. I'm sure Grant's talked about this a lot of times, and also I've heard it a couple of times on the podcast, that when we're going in and speaking, we want to make sure that we're connecting with some people there that are that show that we're paying attention. That if we mention somebody that we've met in the crowd, or we mention the CEO, or we mention the leader, you know, if we had dinner with them the night before, we had lunch with them, or even if we just came in 10 minutes before the speech, that we've met someone, we've had a conversation, we pull that into the message so that people are able to see that we're not simply going through a rote message that we've given, keynote that we've given 1,000 times, but instead that we're actually inserting very current and very present conversations. Principles. If you understand exactly where the client stands and what their company stands for, their organization stands for, then we're able to pull those principles in as well so that we're in alignment with what they're already standing for, and not getting up and saying something by accident that like goes against everything that they stand for. That's just not going to go over well and not going to get you rehired, right? Then our points are also going to be matching the content and going to match the client as well. This is not something we've got to change too much every single time. You just have to look over those and make sure that they match. So when I'm talking to insurance companies and I say something like, it's about people and not just policies, well, that'll work in just about any organization. But if I happen to do something faith-based, I'm not going to do policy necessarily. I'm going to switch that to something else that's going to help them see a little bit better. I might say something along the lines of it's about people and not just passages, because in that realm, sometimes we can so elevate something out of context that people are pushed to the side, right? So we have to be careful with that, make sure that our points are really in alignment with the client. And then proof. If we can use some evidence from the client, from the organization, that's going to help us out. But we also just want to make sure that it's current and that it's relevant. So we take our content, we put it in context for the client, and that helps us create that killer keynote that is highly connective with everybody in the audience and very connective to the clients and those associated with them. Number 3 is confidence. Number 3 is confidence. So here is our confidence chart. At the top is crush, bottom is mush, left is dull, and right is dynamic. So with crush, this vertical line here, this has to do with our content. And dull to dynamic, horizontal, is going to have to do with our delivery. So content is up and down, delivery is across. So when we're thinking about confidence, often we just feel like, well, if I've got a good message and I feel good about it, I'm going to be confident with it. But confidence is a little bit more about energy as it relates to our content. So what we want to do is just speak with passion or just leave me a note. It's like one of my favorite sayings, speak with passion or just leave me a note. Passion does not mean I've got to be crazy, but it does mean that I'm connected to my content and I believe in it. So if it's dull and if it's mush, it's kind of a spill. We've just kind of spilled some ideas, some rhetoric. We've spilled some stories out. And if we have in this area, there's got to be like a cleanup on aisle 7. It's pretty bad if you go and you speak somewhere and people have to come out and make up for it. I was at an event one time where the person who went on right before me was extremely vulgar. I mean, to the max. And so I got up and I was speaking next. During the middle of my keynote, they led the guy out on the stage, stopped the keynote, led the guy out on the stage, and he had to apologize to the audience. He said, I have to come out here and apologize to you guys because I've got a flight and they will not let me leave until I apologize. That joker had spilled. There was a cleanup that had to be done. It was, you know, and believe it, it was as awkward as that sounds. So we've got to be careful and not spill, and we're not going to do that type of damage, but we can't just be out there lackadaisical about content, about our presentation. Secondly is pill. If there's mush, but it's dynamic, we've kind of given them a little bit of a pill, a little bit of a prescription that's going to help them feel better, but there's nothing there. There's nothing that's of lasting consequence. It's going to be short term. Once the effects wear off, there's nothing there because the content wasn't strong. When your content is mush, but you're a dynamic presenter, well, people leave feeling good, but they reflect on it and they begin to wonder, what happened? What did I actually get from that? Skill. If we're going to live at all, I think it needs to be above this line. Now, skill is when you got crushing content, but you're dull as a communicator. But the truth is, it's the audience's responsibility for the most part to make sure they're getting those points. They're getting what you're sharing, that you're sharing a skill. And the higher level skill you share, the higher level content you share, I'm not saying you don't need to be interesting, but it's not quite as critical. For example, let's say that there was a guy that for sure, 100%, could teach you in 1 hour how to make $1 million in the next year, completely legal, even if you've got zero in your bank account right now. I know this is an extreme example, I get it. But that guy, if he could literally do that, if it was legit, you would not care if he was dull or not. You wouldn't be like, man, show me how to make $1 million. Got $1 million in my bank account right now, but he was dull. I would never sit through that again. You'd be like, I would sit through that all you wanted me to because his content crushed. His content was valuable. If you feel like I'm not the best presenter, fine. Get you some content that is unmatchable. So that even if the audience goes, you know what, that wasn't the best presentation, but I'm telling you, I've never heard anybody that knew any more about it. That was incredible. That'll leave you at a different level. And then finally is thrill. And this is where most of us want to live. We want content that just crushes, and we want a dynamic presentation so that the audience is uplifted by our energy. We're excited about the energy. We're excited about the content. They're excited about the content. And it's just fun all the way around. So our confidence usually comes in these areas. If we know our content is not bad, then we're kind of nervous. And truth is, I think we should be. Those of you who are like personality plus, chances are you've sometimes leaned on your personality and your content's not always been the best because your personality overcame the content. And that's true in the moment. It's not true down the road. So others of you are like, I'm just not a great presenter, but I've got some great content. I want to tell you that will get hired over and over and over again because there's not just a lot of primo content out there. And if you're a person that thrills the audiences, you got great content, you got a great dynamic presentation, you're going to get booked over and over and over again. The reason that Grant's been able to do so much speaking is because he's a thrill speaker. He's a dynamic speaker, but he's got incredible content that connects. And he did, so much time with young people. If you're killing it in college and in high school settings, you've got the skill level and you've got the thrill level to be able to bring that together. So there's your little confidence matrix. You might want to circle where you are and make it a goal to move into the other section. I think the lowest section we need to be in is skill, and the goal obviously is thrill, if we can be there at all. So when it comes to confidence, one of the things that I have on the opt-in form and also that went out in the email today is, what do we do when we freeze or we lose the crowd? That just kind of kills our audience, kills our confidence, because we're like, man, I lost the crowd. What am I going to do? And you've heard this 1,000 times, but the audience wants you to win. Unless there's the guy or girl out in the audience that thinks it ought to be them on the stage. The truth is they want you to win. They're not out there cheering for your demise. They want you to do a good job or even an adequate job, because we tend to cheer for people and not against people unless they've done us wrong. So what are we going to do if we actually freeze or lose the crowd? Here's about 3 things that hopefully will give you just a little bit of confidence and pullback in it. Oh, before I get to that, your confidence overall, I believe, needs to rest in your content. That your content needs to be clear. You look down at your outline, you feel like, wow, these folks are lucky to hear this today, and you're not being arrogant, but you're being confident because you know it's good. But just because your content is good does not mean there aren't going to be missteps, and there aren't going to be times when you freeze or forget, and there won't be times when you lose the crowd. Those things are just part of speaking. So one of the things I like to say, if I see that I'm really losing the crowd, I'll say, whoa, hold up. I tell you what we need to do, because when you look out and the eyes are blurry, what we're going to do is we're going to back this train up. We're just going to get on board. We're going to put it in reverse. We're going to back up to the last stop, and we're going to hit the steam engine again, and we're going to go forward. And it's weird that something as little as that works. I don't have to clap my hands. I don't have to tell people stand up and massage your neighbor and make them feel as uncomfortable as possible. I instead just go, whoa, hold up. What we're going to do, we're going to take this train back to the station. We're going to come at this again. And it's just one of those quick little pattern interrupts that makes people go, oh, okay, I need to pay attention to that. Sometimes I'll say, let's pull over for just a second. Let's pull over for just a second. So the audience is kind of glazed. It's been a long day. Speaker number 5, they're ready to get to dinner, but you owe the client all of the time, or it can't quit more. Usually I ask, okay, what's the longest I have to go? Like if I quit 10 minutes early, am I in trouble? But once you see them glazing, I'll say, let's pull over for just a second. We're talking about X, but let's pull over for just a second. We're talking about confidence, but let's pull over for just a second. I want to go back to content. Hey, we're talking about this, but let's pull over and I want to hit this from a different direction. Let's pull over for just a second. I want to hit this from a different direction. It's small, it's subtle. Now, it's not a big wake up deal. It's not the old, hey, I want to tell you a story, which you never have to say, by the way. You just start telling the story, and it kind of wakes people up. But let's pull over works. Let's back the train up works. Now, if you freeze and you forget altogether, if you're like me and got like some ADD, ADHD, you will forget stuff. It's just part of it. You can get away with what I'm about to tell you. I can't tell you the number of times I've had to do this. One time I was in front of a crowd, I don't know, it might have been 1,500 folks or so, and I just told a story, and I came out of the story and I had zero idea what that story had to do with anything. I was literally blank, could not remember the current point, and had no clue what the next point was. Now, I could have just been silent, walked back to the podium, found my spot, and carried on. Instead, I said, hey, dude, you on the front row, you're taking notes. What's the last thing I said that made any sense at all? Joe got in his notebook, told me what it was, and away we went. I've done that ever since. Because why? Why did that work? Because the audience wants you to win. The audience wants you to win. And I'm not a professional speaker. I'm a conversational speaker. And so for me to ask somebody in the audience something, dude, I am lost. What is the last thing that made any sense? They're happy to supply it. I've never had one person say, I'm not going to tell you. You're a professional speaker. You're on your own. Nobody's ever said that. So I just say something like that. I think when it comes to freezing or losing the crowd, we overcomplicate it. We try to use a trick or something that's over the top to get their attention back, when you can just say, let's back the train back up. We can go back to the station. Hey, let's pull over for just a second. We want to take this from a different angle. Or, what's the last thing I said that made any sense at all? Audience wants you to win, and that's it for confidence. Let's talk about connection. So we're on our 5 core elements of a gig that crushes it. Number 4 is connection. So how are we going to connect with our audience? Sure, it's through humor and things like that, but we're going to go a little bit deeper with it. We want to help the audience feel your message so that they actually feel what you're feeling. Content is primary. That's the most critical to me. But I also want to have that confidence, and I want to have that context so that I can build this connection, so that I'm not just sharing information, but I'm actually helping them feel what I feel. One of the things that I actually spent a pretty good bit of time talking about, because I talked to life insurance companies, is my first wife passed away in my arms when I was 24 years old. Our son was 5 weeks old at the time. Now, I've got a choice when I tell that story. I can tell it very factually. Here's what happened. Here's what the day was like. I can do very much a content piece. I can do a context piece where I share what that means to this particular audience. But when it comes to connection, I have to determine how much of that I'm going to release in order to allow that audience to feel it and it not look like I'm needing therapy, right? It's very critical. One of the phrases that I heard early on was that everybody wants to see the wreck, but nobody wants to see the blood. So when you're being connective outside of the humor realm, and you're telling a sensitive story, or you're telling a heartbreaking story, everybody wants to see the wreck. They don't want to see the blood. You've got to be able to tell it in a way that they feel that emotion, but you're not losing control. So how do we do this? Number 1 is that we speak from a place of our truth. We're not simply putting a talk together, we're putting truth together. We're putting things together that we believe in, things that we're going to put our reputation on. We believe in it so much. It's such a critical message. So what we're sharing is not just points, but we're sharing actual truth. We're sharing things that we actually believe in. And so when we're going to come in here and we're going to help the audience feel, people feel truth more than they feel facts. Truth is more about a cause or a crusade. And so they actually hear our hearts and they connect with us as a human being. And that's because we're actually having a conversation with them. Even though the audience is not speaking at all, we're still having a conversation with them. We're watching them. We're interacting with them. We hear the laughter or we see the tears being wiped, but we notice the connection. Some of the most ineffective speakers are those who get up and share their content very disassociated and very distant from the audience. Instead, you want to be able to share your truth. Now, I want to guard on us a little bit here because there's a tendency, if we've got a heartbreaking story, there's the tendency to live in that. If you've got a 60-minute talk, you can probably spend about 10, maybe 15 minutes down in the valley. The rest of your time needs to be mid-level or even on the mountaintop. People cannot stay in the valley. Nobody wants to stay in the valley. So if your truth is valley-based, share the valley and get out of there, because they're there to see how to get out of the valley. Everybody knows what it's like in the valley. People are not connected to us because of success. They're connected to us because of pain, and people don't want to relive it. They want to hear about the pain, and then they want to move on to the promise. So our truth helps us to do that. Secondly is trust. So that they realize through our stories and through our experiences or through our research, through our points, through our proof, that they can actually trust us. That they are able to see, you know what? All right, this guy, this girl, I believe them. Maybe even to the level of I believe in them. And trust is not about having certain credentials or being an author or having spoke a certain number of times. It comes down to watching the person, hearing the stories, knowing if you could depend on them, if you could rely on them, if what they're saying is real, and they begin to trust that. And they begin to see your authenticity and know that it's real, and you forge this bond and this connection. We've all been in audiences where somebody spoke, and we thought, I feel like I'm the only person they're even speaking to. How does that happen? It happens because of truth and because of trust. Now, when you got truth and you've got trust, you get transfer. And transfer happens when the audience actually feels your message. So that when you're talking in a lighthearted way, they actually feel that lightheartedness. When you're talking in a tough way, they feel that toughness. When you're struggling with an idea, wrestling with a memory, they can actually feel that. And it's real. Because there's truth and there's trust and there's transfer. And that builds the connection with the audience. Now, sometimes that has to do with the emotions that are in the valley, and sometimes it has to do with emotions that are happy, and sometimes it has to do with this feeling of, I just discovered this. You know, these are all emotional aspects. Sometimes it has to do with anger, and sometimes it has to do with humor. So those are all part of our connections. This is one of my favorite connection stories. This is Lisa Ashwood, and she called a while back. She called me up and she said, Paul, is there any way that you can make me funny? In other words, she wanted to connect with her audience. I said, I don't know. I said, tell me about sitcoms that you like. She said, I don't like any sitcoms. I said, no, for real. I mean, like, what's the funniest movie that you've ever watched? I don't really watch any funny movies. I said, okay, so when you're with your friends, what do you joke around about? She said, I don't really joke around. I said, okay, so how would your friends describe you? Here was her exact word. Earnest. I said, well, Elisa, I am not going to be able to make you funny. But we absolutely can borrow funny, and that'll loosen you up for your talk. And she was doing a talk to a human resource group, this 400-person general session for this human resource company. And I said, well, what we know about human resources is that they're not really admired by the rest of the company. You know, they're kind of taken for granted, or they're the ones that have to do layoffs and nobody's excited about them. I said, why don't we make a movie trailer and get one of those guys with the deep voices? And I can't do that, but, you know, basically it was, you know, in a world where human resources are hated and despised. And she had like newsreels coming up and all of this war and bombs, and the human resource people might not have worked in any of the audience, but they were dying laughing. So she says, I spoke today in this 400-person general session, and it was actually funny. Truth was, she wasn't funny. We borrowed funny, but it still built this incredible connection. Makes a big difference. When there's truth, she stayed with her truth. She didn't try to be funny. She borrowed it. There's trust. She was being real about who she was. And there was transfer, because she took a topic that sometimes is off limits at a corporate event like that, and she brought it into the light. And then finally, conversion. How do we turn this into more business? And how do we actually get paid? Which a lot of folks would like to know about. So when it comes to conversion, and we've covered what? Content, context, confidence, connection, and now conversion. So how do we convert with our talk? So to get more gigs and to get more checks, number one, you want to read the audience. You don't want to be so wrapped up in your talk that the audience doesn't exist. You want to read them, and you want to pick up on where their interest level is. Okay, so this is a webinar. It's way different than being in front of a live audience. In front of a live audience, when I shared some of these testimonials or case studies from folks that I've highlighted very briefly, I would be able to look out in the audience and tell, when I talked about Shauna, who was excited about that. I'd be able to instantly recognize that. Or when I talked about Elisa, I would be able to see who was interested in that, who maybe thought they weren't funny. So I'd be able to read the audience, because this is a conversation. I'm watching them. It's not one-sided. It's two-way. It's just that I'm dominating the verbal conversation. So you want to read the audience. Secondly, you want to seed. You want to mention some things. Obviously, I've done that a little bit with this presentation by giving some examples from some clients. What does it seed? It seeds that I work with people to improve their communication, their speaking, help them with keynotes, help them be funny if they're not, something along those lines. So I've seeded that. We do that in our talk as well if we want more business. So when I'm talking to insurance companies, I don't simply do the talk for that company. I mention other companies. When I was working with X, Y, and Z company, or when I was at X, Y, and Z branch within your own organization, what am I doing? I'm seeding that this is what I do. This is my business. This is my day-to-day, so that they're not simply thinking, and people do, oh, this person came in to speak and leaves. They're not thinking, oh, this person came in to speak, and now I can hire them to come to mine, to come to me, right? So that's one of the big critical elements, is that we make sure that they're actually able to know that we do this. Lead. Back to truth and connection. That's a big way that we lead our audience, that we're speaking with that authority, with that certainty. Confidence is another way that we do that. When we display that we're leading other people, that we're leading groups, or even if we have activities within our speech that people participate in, that's part of trust as well. But when we're leading them, and we've been brought in to lead this particular group, then that shows that we're able to lead other groups as well. So we want to read the audience. We want to seed our services and the things that we do. We want to lead them to show that we can be trusted to take them down a specific path. And then we also, let me go back one. We want to deed, so that we may actually give them something to do. We might actually give them something to do, an action to take. And it depends on where you're speaking whether or not you get to do this. And if you can't do it during your talk, you definitely do it after your talk. So when I got started, I made sure that I was in front of a lot of different insurance agencies at one time. And so the way that I deeded the conversation over to them, as I said, hey guys, we're about to get just to the close of this message today, but I know that a lot of you represent a lot of different audiences. And I know as well that this message would help your people sell more effectively. It would also give them hope for their current work, and it would also allow them to see the impact that they're making. So when we get done here today, if you want me to come and speak to your organization, come speak to your office, come speak at your next meeting, just, hey, don't be shy. Just come up. Let's talk. Let's get it booked, get it in the books. And I'd love to help your people reach the next level by sharing this story from a client perspective. No, if you've got permission to do that, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think. I don't think it's heavy. I don't think that it is pushy. It's an invitation for a further conversation. So sometimes we need that. So that is it for conversion. So this is Angie. She was a new speaker, and she says, I like to say he just put the cookies on the shelf that I can reach and I can take it to another level, which is kind of the reason she was saying that, cookies on the shelf, is that she's tiny. She's short, and I am short. I'm 5.5. So us reaching any shelf is just about a miracle. Said, I got my first booking on the flight home using Paul's amateur agent strategy. So what did that do? That led her, and it also was a deed for her. I led her with the amateur agent strategy of how to get booked, even if you got no resources, you got no speaker page, you got no speaker video reel, you got nothing. You've armed with nothing. So I taught her that, and she gets booked on the flight home after learning about it. So I led her. So that conversion ended up leading to a higher conversion, right? Into the speaking program. So likewise, it deeded her. I gave her a directive. You know, when you get on the flight, why don't you do this? Why don't you follow the amateur agent strategy, and we'll see what happens. And she gets booked on the way home. So likewise, when you're talking in front of a crowd, you can lead them and you can deed them. You give them something to do. You can do that with your clients, but you can also do it with your audience so that it ends up making a big difference and a big impact. So the best way to get a gig is to crush a gig. And we're going to do an assessment in just a minute. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask if there are any questions over anything that we hit so far with content, context, connection, confidence, and conversion. If you've got any questions about anything that we hit so far, if you'll just type that in, and I'll answer that before we do this assessment together, just to see where you are. See where you might want to improve. I think that's one of the big keys, is just to make sure that we're really connected. Dave says, outstanding so far. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that, brother.
Hey, I'll just jump in real quick, Paul.
All right, y'all all invite me and Grant to tag team and speak at your company.
No, we're game for that, dude. I want to just say on my end, like, you're doing a great job. Like, this is extremely practical. It's not the pie in the sky theories and random ideas, but this is stuff that even as there's a couple times where you're saying something and I'm just nodding right along, or I start to say something and then you jump right in and say it too. And so this is really, really relevant content. So great job, dude. Keep crushing it.
Man, I appreciate that, brother. It means a lot, guys. Listen, me and Grant both, I can't speak for Grant, but I'm gonna. We're probably speaker snobs, teacher snobs. We've heard a lot of bad information. For him to even come back on and compliment, is good. And I appreciate you guys saying it was crushing. So Annie says, what is your process for getting super clear on your message? And actually, obviously, you guys know that I will give you an opportunity to take this farther in a few minutes, because I'll give you my exact process if you're interested in that. But overall, Annie, when it comes to getting super clear, what I love to do is to get all of my ideas out there, and I might put down 50 or 100. And then I take the topic that I'm supposed to be speaking about, and I group those 100 ideas into patterns. How are they alike? How are they related? And then I pull them down to 3 to 5 overall themes. 3 to 5 overall themes, points that are directly related to the overall purpose of that specific event. And the reason that I want to do that is that if I just sit down and come up with 3 or 4 points, they're not going to be the best points. But if I will dump out every idea and concept that I can think of, I can pattern those together, and then I can connect those to the overall focus of that message, I'm going to get really clear on it. And I'm going to cross out stuff that's not a necessity. So let's say that you got some stuff that you really love to share, but you don't know if it's really needed. Then just ask the question, if I leave this out, have I actually cost the audience? 9 times out of 10, we could just leave it out. But every now and then, you're going to be like, yep, the audience has to know this. Not, I want to share it. Not, I think it's a great point. The audience has to know this. Oh, Gary says, have you ever brought a member of your audience on stage? I do it just about every time. Because I'm so short, I usually ask if there's anybody in the, everybody that's 6'4" in the room and above, if it's a big room, everybody 6'4" and above to stand. And then I go up the ladder and I get the tallest person to come up, and I'm like around their waist, right? So I do a lot of self-deprecating humor right out of the gate. So I'll bring them up on stage. When I'm talking to young people, I use a lot of food ingredients and bring them up on stage to help me put together a recipe in one of my particular talks. So I do actually bring audience members on stage. Orlando says, how do you go about organizing your thoughts? I think we've already covered that. Shola says, amazing content. Thank you. Ebony says, great information. Thank you. Awesome. William says, great job. Matt says, how do you suggest we gain context, problems, and principles before we speak? Great question, Matt. I'm going to tell you a brief story that's not even associated in just a second. But we ask the clients, and if we're there ahead of time, we talk to some of the people that will be in the audience. But let me give you an example of when that was actually given to me. I was speaking at a medical conference about, it was last year, and I was coming in to talk about goal setting and achievement. Well, when I got there, the director came up to me and said, these folks have been in technical presentations for the last 3 days. Everything that has to do with correct surgery, to understanding the current laws that have just come on the books and how it relates to them. Their brains are fried. Is there any way that for the next hour you could just make them laugh? I said, so what you're saying is that I do not have to share anything of any value. He said, yeah. I said, I can do that. And so we did not share any points at all. We just kind of laughed. I just told stories for an hour. The check did not decrease. So it was pretty cool. But see, that was context, right? If I'd gone in and just done my talk, I may not have been able to capture the crowd at all. They were just zombies. But because they got to come in and not think and not process, the context was given to me. But most of the time we have to ask for it. William said, crushing it, no soda. Vicky says, I tend to overstuff my talk, so much information I want them to take away. How can I pare them down and still feel that I've given them plenty of meat? It's all well received, not criticized. I'm pushing the time limit. So ultimately, Vicky, to me, the goal is, what is the outcome here? What are they going to go and do? And can I make sure that they can go and do that thing? If it's just information and there's not a directive, you can share just about as much information as you want, but if there's a directive, if they're going to go and do something with it, then it's like riding a bicycle. If I'm going to teach my kid how to ride the bike, I'm going to minimalize all of the instructions. I'm not going to go, okay, I'm going to give you my 24.8 point approach to bicycle riding. Kid would be like terrified, panicked. It's too much. But if instead I say, I'm going to tell you, there's only 3 things you ever need to remember when it comes to riding a bike. There's going to be an exhale. Kid's going to be like, whew, okay, this might be possible. So you think in terms of what really is essential for this to be an accurate message that they can go and apply. And, you can talk to a couple of audience members afterwards if you want to, especially if you're not sensitive, and I'm not sensitive, so it wouldn't bother me. But I would call up a couple of audience members that I got close to while I was there and say, okay, out of everything that I shared, what was not essential? If I left it out, it wouldn't have been a big deal. And if you will interview 3 to 5 people, you'll find out what you don't really have to use. And he says, thanks. Kristen said, thanks for not selling us for the last third of the webinar. Hey, Kirsten, don't worry. I'm going to sell you something. I do not want you to be disappointed. Do you collect emails from the audience? How do you like to do this? I do it in 2 ways. One is that I will actually put a web address up on the screen, and I'll tell everybody to take their phones out and go to that web address, because all that's on that page is an opt-in, name and email. There's no headline. There is no information. I tell them on the screen that this is what they're going to get. So let's say like today, I said, hey, if you want a copy of today's slides, here's where to get them. And I put a URL up on the screen, and when they got there, all it would say would be name and email, or just email and submit, and that's it. And I would lead the audience through it. The other way is to use something like Lead Digits or Call Loop, where people can actually text you their email address, and it'll enter a database, and then you download it and import it into your own autoresponder. I think Lead Digits from Lead Pages will do that automatically, and it'll go into your autoresponder. Bill says, unpack shareable a bit more. So we're talking about memorable, portable, and shareable. Shareable is just like when you go to a movie and you come out and your friend goes, what you been up to today? And you go, I went to the movie. I just went and saw X, Y, and Z. How was it? Dude, you got to go see it. And you start going through the plot. That is shareable. So shareable to me is even beyond, if we go a little deeper with it, it's a little bit beyond just, hey, let me share with you a couple of points. Shareable is almost the level in which you go, I've got to tell you about this person I heard and what they said. Now, if they'll just share your points, I think that's what we want to do. But if they get excited about you and tell other people about it, you and your message, I think that that's supreme shareability. Memorable, portable, shareable. Kirsten, LOL, you made my day. Sell to me. Be patient. Vicky, thanks so much. Help me focus on my purpose. Good. Annie, thanks. JC says, being that I'm a young person in age that speaks to a lot of youth, and social media is the way of the world at the moment, do you recommend using your social sites for youth and college events and website only for corporate and association speaking? You know, JC, I really believe that Grant will probably be able to answer that a little bit better than I could. Grant, I don't know if you're out getting a snack, but if you're still here, if you don't mind jumping on.
Yeah, I'm here.
JC, yeah, hit that for us about, should she be using social media a little bit more, or using the website only for corporate and association speaking?
Yeah, I think I mean, there's a couple different variables. I've got her question pulled up, and I'm not super clear what she's asking here. But if you're talking about the in terms of the marketing itself, I don't know that social is going to be real great for marketing in general, whether it's for associations or for youth and college audiences. In terms of, let's just talk about the website itself. You know, if you speak to youth and colleges and corporations and associations, should you basically have all that on the same site? One thing I would say is I would try to, if it were me, I would try to narrow that down of who it is that you speak to, so you're not spreading yourself too thin by trying to speak to everybody. So I would start with that. Having said that, though, I know that there are some people who do speak successfully to all of those different audiences, and they just put it all on the same site. So whenever you go to their speaking page, though, it's almost like a landing page where then they can kind of self-select from there what they are looking for help with. So if you're looking for a youth speaker, go to this part of the site. If you're looking for a corporation or association speaker, go to this part. Because even though you may be providing a keynote, what you would be talking about, whether it's a keynote or workshop or whatever you would be providing, what you would be talking about would look differently to a corporation or association versus if you're speaking at a high school. So making sure that you're not trying to talk to everyone in the same way, because they are different audiences.
Perfect. Man, thank you, brother. Appreciate that. All right, so last question. What does the L stand for in conversation? You said read, seed, lead, and you said deed. The L was actually lead. So you wrote that down correctly. And that just means that we're leading with authority, that we're putting our presence out there. That's how you get hired as a leader. You don't get hired to keep speaking. You're not crushing a gig if you're up there in a shell. Now, I look at things like, we're going to do this assessment in a minute. I look at things at a 1 to 10 level. I try to speak at a 7.5 to 8 level. It's lower on this webinar, but 7.5 to 8 level, because that's where I have the biggest connection. Let me at level 10, it's obnoxious. It's just obnoxious. No, it's not even fun to me. So I try to stay around 7.5 or 8, and that's leadership. Whereas if I was speaking at a 2 or 3 energy level, a 2 or 3 shyness level, it's hard to get booked if you're kind of in the shell. All right, let's do the assessment. Number 1, unforgettable, memorable, portable, and shareable. 1 is that you are none of it. And all the way on the right end is that you think about your messages and what the audience receives, and you believe you are memorable, portable, and shareable. 1 to 10. 1 to 10. Content. How would you rate your content? You think about your last 2 or 3 engagements or an upcoming engagement. 1 to 10. 10 is if this audience misses this presentation, they are going to experience one of the biggest losses of their life. 1 is I'm even embarrassed about what I put together. Context. How well do you know the context of this next presentation? 1 is I don't know it all. 10 is I'm really familiar. Confidence. How confident are you as a speaker in general? 1 is I'm not confident at all. They have to push me up on stage. 10 is they have to pull me off the stage because I'm so at home. Connection. When you're speaking to an audience, do you tend to connect with them or do you tend to kind of do your thing and you don't really know that they're there? And then when you meet the audience afterwards, you're kind of surprised people were present. So that's number 1. And then number 10 is that you feel this hyper connection with the audience and you feel like they feel every single emotion coming out of you and you feel the emotions coming out of them from every side. Usually people who are HSP or hypersensitive personality are ones that feel that the most. Most of us live around level 5. Conversion. When you speak, do you get more engagements or do people come up and ask you if you will take their money? That's level 10. If you've never had anybody to ask you to speak anywhere again after an engagement and nobody's ever offered you money, that could be level 1 or 2. All right. So do your little assessment real quick, and I'm going to grant Kirsten's wish and sell unto ye. I'm not much of a salesman, but I think this package is pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. So there you have it. If you are, averaging 3 or 4 or below, then just go ahead and be prepared to buy. If you're a 5 to about a 7 or an 8, you should still buy. If you're an 8 or 10 on a 9 or 10 on every one of them, if you buy, you'll learn a lot of stuff, but you're already crushing it. I just help you crush it a little bit harder. All right, so let's cruise into it really quick. And this is not expensive, just so you know. 2 options. We can do this fast, but you can do it slow. You can get your content rocking fast, or you can do it slow and get out there and experiment. Of course, I'm taking all experimentation out of the way. 3 of my top selling products combined into 1, the perfect presentation. This is for traditional messages. Storycraft is if you've got a story. Like I've got a story of the loss of my wife, and Storycraft shows you how to take your personal story and to actually put it into play. And then Speak Strong is all about confidence. It's going to make you a more confident speaker. Now then, here's what's in there. Step-by-step framework, how I create the perfect premise for your message, the perfect presentation planner that you get to use for every single message, and it consists of 10 powerful modules. This normally sells for $97 all day long, and you're welcome to go and purchase it for that, but you don't have to. Storycraft sells by itself for $97. It's how to turn your story into a killer keynote. 5 modules take you step-by-step to crafting your story, S-T-O-R-Y. And you get the guide that you get to use each and every time. So you get to allow your story to impact and influence more lives than ever before. Speak Strong sells for, you guessed it, $97 all by itself. It's step-by-step to speaking with power and passion, taking you from dull to dynamic. Gain true confidence with the Confident Speaker Formula. 25 instant speaking boosters. Why being a contrarian sets you free, for those of you who are always felt like you were just a little bit different. 10 steps to gaining confidence and 13 modules in all to grow your belief so that you can own the stage and thrill audiences. Absolutely. Then all of that, is basically $297. But bonus for us today, Perfect Presentation Live. We're going to meet again next Thursday about this same time. It will be recorded, where I will take your questions. We'll work through any of the segments of the perfect presentation, of story crafting, of Speak Strong, and do all of that, answering your questions and work through things. However, I do have a little bit of a bonus here that I mentioned that I usually get a lot of questions about afterwards, and that is the amateur agent. This is what I call the booking catalyst. It's based on the Council of Connection, the attraction gap, and the agent locator. So how do you get booked if you don't have a speaker agent? How do you get booked if you don't have a one sheet or any of those other tools? How do you get booked? That's exactly what the amateur agent does, and we'll go step by step through that live next Thursday, and that's included. So basically, this is a $497 package, and I guess if I was to add in amateur agent, because it sells for itself for $97, that's really closer, almost to $600 is the quote retail value. Type in what you think it is today, just for fun. How much do you think this package is? It's $500, $600 total. 147, 197, $1 million Canadian. I love it. 199, 150. Good, good, good. 300. And in fact, if you would like to spend any of those levels, it would be okay. But Lewis got it right. It is $97. Just 97. That's it. 97. If you go to thespeakerlab.com/Paul, it's $97. Thespeakerlab.com/Paul, it's $97 until Sunday night. And then it's going back. All the prices are going to go back. And what will happen is when you go to this link on Sunday night, it's going to send you to a page where you're just going to a la carte it, and you get to pay $97 for each one individually. And if you want to come to the perfect presentation next week and want to pay $197, you get to do that. But go to thespeakerlab.com/Paul and get it for $97. We'll hang out here a few more minutes. We got a hooray from Lewis, who won. William, who won. Cool. Michael says the value is $1 million. I love it. Y'all all go buy right now. That's how strong I am on my clothes. Y'all go buy right now. Thespeakerlab.com/Paul. Grant, come back on. Let's close it out, brother. Anything you think we need to cover?
Man, again, I think that was really just solid, practical stuff. I think one of the big points here to make is that and you touched on this in the beginning, the line. Let me pull it up here. The best way to get a gig is to crush a gig. I love that, and because it's your talk itself is your best marketing tool. So. One of the things I always say is that if you're great at marketing but you suck as a speaker, you're not going to be able to build a career doing that. You're going to get some one-off stuff here and there, and people are like, they're really good at getting the gig, but if you can't deliver, then it's hard to sustain that long term. So this is what I love about what you're teaching here. Is this is really practical, relevant stuff that can really make a big impact. So I'm excited about this. This is like over $600 in value here that he's doing for only $97. When he first told me about this, and even now as we're kind of going back over it, he keeps piling stuff on, and it's just like, dang, $600. That seems like a lot for only $97. So. But I know that Paul is invested in helping you guys, want to make sure that you guys are successful. Paul and I have both done a significant amount of speaking, and so we know what it's like, especially when you're getting going, and I know a lot of you may just be starting your speaking career, and so we want to make this as much of a no-brainer as possible. And so $97, like that is I can't get any more no-brainer than that. So really strong stuff, Paul. I really enjoyed it personally, and excited about the people that are going to be joining and being part of this.
Man, I love it. Some are coming through already. I appreciate that. I've got a couple of questions coming in. Shola says, is the amateur agent included immediately? No, that's part of the live presentation next week. Dave asked, what are the modalities of the other pieces? Book, audio, webinar. Great question, Dave. It's all already loaded, and it's all video, but they're very brief. Each section is very brief, and then you get the worksheets with each one of these. Like the presentation has 10 modules, story crafting has 6 modules, and Speak Strong has 13 modules. And then those come with worksheets. Speak Strong is just straight training and teaching on that. And what you'll do is after checkout, you'll set up your account, and you'll be able to log in anytime that you want. It's behind a protected password area. Keith, the webinar next Thursday will be at 2 p.m. Central Time, same time as today. Good question. Good question. Thespeakerlab.com/Paul. Go into there right now.
And I included that link in the chat there on the right side.
Perfect.
So you can click that link again, thespeakerlab.com/Paul. Will take you right to the registration form. So it looks like yeah, a couple people have already started to trickle in on that. So you're making a good call by being a part of that.
Man, I love it, guys. Appreciate you guys doing that. I'm looking forward to serving you and helping you. And don't forget, there will be free coaching during the live event next Thursday as well. So you're not just left out there hanging as you go through the modules this week. If there's any question about anything, just write it down and we'll cover that live. It's not like, hey, I'm going to buy this, get no support. We'll be working through that together, and also we'll be covering the amateur agent to help you get booked if you don't have the tools and you're not doing marketing in the traditional way. Let's see, we're right here at 310. We kept it fairly tight, I thought, overall. Grant, anything else we need to add here at the close, brother?
No, I think we're in pretty good shape here. I was kind of just scanning through to see if there's any other questions here. Let's see. There's no coupon code necessary, right?
No coupon code is required.
Cool.
It's already set at 97.
Gotcha.
Yes,
Amateur agent, ongoing strategy that we can use, or just at the beginning?
yes, I use it still to this day. I'll tell some stories about that next week. In fact, I'm getting some bureau bookings these days, but for the most part, I'm doing everything just by turning gigs into more gigs. And the amateur agent I still use right now. And I'll tell you a story that happened earlier this year that I think you'll find pretty insightful as far as that. So I've been speaking for the past, 30 something years and still using it.
Yeah, I would
Great.
personally echo, and I know you're going to go into more depth on it, but I think sometimes speakers just in general, we get nervous about the sales part or the marketing part, but really, and then as a result of that, sometimes what happens is we start looking for, is there an agent out there? Is there a bureau who will book us? But I know for Paul, you and I both, we do very little bureau bookings. I think in my career, maybe 1 or 2% have come from bureaus. So I always kind of view it as like, if I get a bureau booking or if I get something from an agent, that's great, but I don't want to build my business on that. So I know that I can find bookings myself and can keep a higher percentage, obviously, of it than paying that out. So I think what you're going to be teaching here is going to be definitely worthwhile for people.
Yeah, I think for sure that we tend to overcomplicate it. I'm not saying that it's a simple process, but by and large, we're thinking that if we get the agent, the real agent, the bureau, or if we get a certain thing in place, that it's going to be magical. But Grant hit it on the head. You can be a great marketer and you can get some gigs marketing well, but you don't get multiple gigs from one unless you're really crushing it and your content is solid and you're blowing it up. Now, when I say blow it up, it doesn't mean that you necessarily got to thrill the audience like we talked about, but you do need to skill the audience like we talked about. Dave said, wonderful content and delivery. You crushed it and got more gigs. Nice way to demonstrate. I appreciate that, brother. This will be rebroadcast, Nicole. Great question. Oh, Rochelle, she says the handout says RSLL. Turn that L into a D by connecting the top of the L and the lower right of the L. That was my bad. Very good. Good, guys. We got some folks coming in on the order. I'm watching my email right now. I love it. Do not hesitate.
Yeah, it looks like we have Leo that's joined, and Bruce, Michael, Margaret. Let's see, a couple others are starting to trickle in as well. So yeah, welcome to all you guys.
Man, appreciate it. Knock it out.
Are you? There's a question that just came in from Nicole about the rebroadcast and just the replay. Will you be emailing that out, or how would they get a hold of that?
I will. I'll do it in two forms. One is that when we get done here today, I will allow GoToWebinar to send it out as its own attachment, and then I will also set it up on its own page, Nicole, and I will email everybody. That way it'll be two ways for you to watch. It'll guarantee that one of them gets to you. But this link will only work till Sunday night. It'll still be on the rebroadcast. You can watch that, but it'll be different prices after Sunday night. I just want to be clear on that so people aren't like, hey, I just watched your video. It's been 6 years. I was wondering if this deal was still good. That's hypothetical. Good times. All right. Well, that looks like we got most of the questions answered. Brenda says Sunday, EST, estimated time. Let's say 10 p.m. Central. 10 p.m. Central Standard Time.
That's our bedtime.
11 p.m. I should still be up. If not, I'll shut it down early. I go to bed at 9 and I wake up at 4.
You get up at 4?
I wake up. I got up at 3:30 today. I wake up between 3:30 and 4. I try to get in bed by, well, I say 9:30 or 10.
That's hardcore, dude.
It's just wiring, brother. It's not a plan. It's not like I read some productivity book and thought, I'm going to start waking up at 4. But I grew up kind of on a farm-ish area, and my mom was a school teacher, and she woke us up every day at 5 anyway. So I was raised getting up early, and my friends at school hated for me to spend the night because they wanted to sleep till 10, and I wouldn't have any of it. Man, I was up at 4 or 5 and waking them up, and it just didn't go well.
That's funny.
I didn't get invited out much after that. All right, guys, we're going to close it down. I appreciate you coming out today, taking notes, asking questions. Cannot wait to hear how you've applied. For those of you who are bought, I love it. And those of you who are contemplating, I will send out the deadline. Make sure you get this $97 deal for about $600 in value. And that's like for real. It's not one of those marketer made-up things. It's what I sell stuff for. So that way you know that it is accurate. Grant, anything else we need to hit, brother?
Man, again, I think this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and the offer that you put together here for just $97 is a no-brainer. So yeah, definitely look out for the check out that link. Just click that link. I put that in the chat, or you can go directly to thespeakerlab.com/Paul. So that's where to go, folks, and we will see you on the inside there.
All right, guys. Hey, speak with passion, or just leave me a note. Be blessed.